friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a wrap-up of all of the picture books that I read in the month of April. The wonderful Shelley Swearingen and Jack from Spread Book Joy hosted a picture book readathon for the month of April. I'm so thankful that they created this space to explore picture books, and I had a ton of fun reading them this month. So in this video, I'm not going to be going through every single picture book I read because I read 46 picture books, which would be too long of a video. So instead, I have them grouped into categories and I will be just highlighting a few that really stood out to me. And I'll also be sharing some things I learned along the way in this picture book reading journey. So I'll start with giving a little bit of background. Basically, I didn't grow up reading picture books and I wasn't read picture books out loud very often. If I was, they were Russian picture books. I also don't have kids yet, so I don't like regularly read picture books to anyone in my life who's younger. Also, in my April TBR, I had a wonderful viewer who recommended reading the picture books out loud because more often than not, they were created for the read aloud experience. And so with every single one of these 46 picture books, I read them out loud. So that was a really fun experiment and something that I will definitely take with me when reading picture books in the future. That being said, let's get into the books. So the first category in this video is going to be classic picture books. Like I mentioned, I was never really read these out loud, and so I was unfamiliar with the stories. I had heard about them, or honestly have seen a lot of them given in baby shower gifts, but I have never read them. So in total, I read 13, and I'm going to just briefly mention all the ones I read and then my standouts. Blueberries for Sal by Robert McCloskey, Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey, Madeline by Ludwig Bemelins, Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak, Corduroy by Dawn Freeman, The Rainbow Fish by Marcus Pfister, Alexander and the Wind-Up Mouse by Leo Leone, The Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats, Goodnight Moon by Margaret Wise Brown, and then these were definitely my favorites out of this classic category, and that was The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. This one I enjoyed the reading process. Totally get why a child would absolutely love this book with all of the little cutouts and color in it. Millions of Cats by Wanda Gag. This one was definitely a surprise favorite, and I hadn't heard of it before this readathon, but this one, although has a repetitive wording throughout it, I thought it was kind of funny, kind of clever, and kind of silly. I enjoyed it. The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. This one was also a surprising one with the depth of it and the thought behind it, and it was actually kind of a sad story, but I thought well told and simplistic but impactful. And then finally for classics, The Story of Ferdinand by Munro Leaf. I picked this one up because I love the cover, and I thought this one was also a really great story set in Spain about a bull who doesn't want to be in a bullfight. So out of all of those, these were definitely the favorites that I would happily go out and buy and read to my kids someday. The other ones weren't bad, just was either a little too repetitive or a little too boring. I didn't really feel anything when I finished the book. The next category of books that I'm going to highlight is one author slash illustrator. I read 6 of his books because I loved one first and loved it and checked the rest out from the library, and that is John Klassen. The very first book I read of his was We Found a Hat, and this is part of a hat book trilogy, and I didn't realize, I think this one is the second one in it, but it's the first one I read and I loved it. Very sarcastic, dry sense of humor, very silly, also kind of simplistic but clever, and I just genuinely laughed out loud when reading this one. And after reading all of these other books that I'll mention in a second, this one was still the favorite. The other two in the hat trilogy is I Want My Hat Back and This Is Not My Hat, and then I believe this is his newest release, and that is The Rock from the Sky. This one was probably the least favorite. It was just a little bit random, still kind of silly, still gave off that same feel, and it was also the longest one. This is like a 90-page or 80-page picture book in comparison to most of these, which are around the 40-page mark. And then these next two are both written by different authors but are illustrated by John Klassen. This one is Sam and Dave Dig a Hole, and Mac Barnett is the author, and The Dark, and this is Lemony Snicket's book. But both of these still had that kind of like silly adventure vibe to them. This next category of books is going to be ones that I really appreciated the illustration style. There was something really unique about the way it was made. These next 7 books for the majority were not standouts in terms of the writing and like the actual story, but I really loved the way that they were made. These next 2 are absolutely stunning, and I heard of these from Gem of Books. The Fox and the Star and The Worm and the Bird, both by Coralie Bickford Smith. This one had absolutely beautiful illustration. The story lacked a little bit for me. They're a bit more up in the air and not fully formed stories, just kind of random words on the page about these themes, but I loved the art style of these and would recommend for those that love beautiful books. This next one was also a surprising one for the art style, The House in the Night by Susan Marie Swanson. I don't know enough about an art style to understand what technique this is. It's like this like black and white lines, scratchy almost, but I love that it was black and white except for the pops of yellow throughout. And this one is definitely more of like a proper poem than other picture books. This next one I picked up because I thought the cover was really cute, and that is Home by Carson Ellis. This one also had a very pretty illustration style, very cute. Loved all the depiction of homes in here, but this was definitely lacking story and flow, and it was just sort of like, oh, that was just like a cute book without meaning or message or takeaway behind it. This next one I also had to highlight, and that is The Journey by Francesca Sana. This one I saw a friend of mine on Instagram mention as she was reading a book to her son, and she pointed out that this was a really well told story about what it's like to immigrate and be a refugee, but told in this beautiful artistic style and in a picture book form. This one had a lot of depth and meaning behind the story being told, paired alongside with stunning illustrations. These next two I saw from What Brings Karina Joy's channel. She read a bunch of picture books to her kids, and these two stood out for me for unique kind of creation behind them. This first one is Every Color of Light, written by Hiroshi Asada and illustrated by Ryoji Arai. This is actually a translated picture book, so that's kind of cool. And this one also quite simplistic, but it has a very unique art style. Like every page truly looks like it was painted on, and it shows all the various tones of blues and greens and yellows and pinks that the sky can have, particularly when it rains. And then finally, for this like artistic slash unique category, is There's a Ghost in the House by Oliver Jeffries. You really cannot see it on this, but why this book was so unique is that it actually has real life photographs of an old home, and then like a colored main character who's talking, and then there's these translucent pages that go over where it shows the ghosts in the house. This one was just such a uniquely created picture book that I had to highlight it, and I can imagine this one being very fun to read with a slightly like older child who would love seeing the little like ghosts pop up on the translucent paper. This next little pile of books are ones that all have to do with either nature or adventure. I will go through all the ones I read and highlight the ones that were standouts to me. In The Jar by Deborah Mercero. These two I picked up because of Amanda from the Curly Readers video on picture books. This first one is The House of Grass and Sky by Mary Lynn Ray. Grandpa Green by Lane Smith. I also picked up The Secret Fawn by Kaylee George and Ellie McKay, and this one was very sweet and also perfect for this time of year. These two I picked up because of Mitzi from Mitzi Reads and Writes. This one's An Extraordinary Egg by Leo Leone and Two Bad Ants by Chris Van Allsburg. I picked up The Hike by Allison Farrell, and one thing I loved about this one is that it's set in the Pacific Northwest and just really evokes all of the themes and nature and beauty of the Pacific Northwest, so this one was a fun one for that. I also read one that I don't have with me, and that is Up in the Garden and Down in the Dirt, and this one was a really cool one all about like gardening and what is happening in nature and the environment when you garden and all that kind of stuff. It was really fun and perfect for this time of year. Another naturey one that I mentioned in my recent bee video, that is Beehive by Jory Hurley. This next one I saw from, again, What Brings Karina Joy's video, and that is The Impossible Mountain. This one has also stunning illustrations and full of adventure, the ultimate adventure story. Maybe I should have highlighted this one in the illustration and art category, but this one also screamed adventure, so had to include it here. These two I highlighted in my recent bee video that I read, a nature poetry collection that was beautiful and a book about bees and nature as well. And then this last one in this category is Rain Before Rainbows. This one, stunning illustrations as well, very bright and colorful illustrations, and again, the story was not lacking depth. There are themes on here on like dealing with grief and being overwhelmed and sadness, but then there's always gonna be like an end and hope to the story. Before I wrap this up and end it with total favorites, I will just briefly mention some that didn't really fit in any of these categories that I picked up this month and that were ultimately kind of gonna be forgettable or passes because they weren't total standouts, but I wanted just to say which ones I read. This one is Honey by David Ezra Stein. Picked it up for the bee video. I actually picked this one up for the bee video but totally forgot to put it in that one, so I'll put it in this one, and that is Honey for You, Honey for Me, a first book of nursery rhymes. And what I learned about this one is that I don't really care about nursery rhymes. They're sort of just random words to me that don't make any sense, but that was my takeaway. I read Kaya and the Bees. The White Cat and the Monk is based on an older poem. This one was also a little bit random, but I did like the art style in it. Just a Second. I picked this one up because of the bees on the cover, but this is a nonfiction picture book about time, and it goes into very scientific detail about time, seconds, minutes, hours, weeks, days, months. This one was informative, but I probably would never read with a kid because I don't think they would like have the attention span for this kind of book. And then The Quiet Book I picked up because of the quiet prompt, and this one I honestly can't even remember what it was about, but different animals that want you to be quiet. I think it's a way to get kids to go to sleep, more of a bedtime read. So to end this video, I will give a quick recap on the 5 books that I gave 5 stars to. But I will start with the first one that didn't fit in any category, and I actually just read it today. Thank you again to Mitzi for recommending it, and that is A Visitor for Bear by Bonnie Becker. This one was sweet and funny, and I just genuinely smiled and would 100% read this with a child, and I think that they would love it. Really cute illustrations and fun story about friendship. I mentioned these 2 B books. They were 5 stars. We Found a Hat by John Klassen made me want to pick up all of his books. And then finally, Rain Before Rainbows, the book that probably really matched substance with art style as well and had a perfect combination of both. So those are all of the picture books that I read in the month of April. Thank you again, Shelly and Jack, for creating this space, for giving permission to read these books, because I learned a lot about myself and am definitely a fan of picture books, regardless or not if you have kids or not. Anyone can read them, and I think that's great. There are so many picture books, and my journey is only beginning, so I probably will be sprinkling picture books throughout my reading wrap-ups from here on out. 1 or 2, maybe 5, maybe more. Who the heck knows? I'm excited to start expanding and growing my personal picture book collection for future children down the line, because that would be really fun. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Please let me know what your favorite picture book is, maybe of all time, maybe that you read as a child, one that maybe you read for the first time this month. What is the #1 picture book that you would recommend for me to read? That's a lot of questions. You can answer whatever you feel like answering or not at all, but I always appreciate your comments down below. I will see you guys in another video soon. Bye!